Hi everybody, this is the Baseball Head, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the People's Champion. Your host, and welcome back to the Baseball Head. Hopefully you like this video, hit that subscribe button. So, I'm a Mets fan, as you can tell. And I hate the Braves because I hate everything about them. I hate Bobby Cox and his sort of, and that dope Leo Mazzoni sitting in the dugout like a fool. I hate the smug face of Chipper Jones and really everything about them. The broadcasters, they're terrible. I can't stand them. I mean, really, they are scum suckers. And I always was very suspicious about how they would win these games all the time, specifically against the Mets. I was always very suspicious of them. I've been very suspicious for many, many years, really since the 90s, because a lot of times there seemed to be a lot of strange things that happen when the Mets played them. Where they would grab victories at the last minute against the Mets, and it would just drive me nuts. And it's never bothered me with the Cardinals when the Mets played the Cardinals, or the Cubs, or the Phillies. But the Braves, it just, everything bothers me about it. So let's get that out on the table. There is hypocrisy now coming from Atlanta. Atlanta is playing terrible, and it's wonderful to watch. They're playing about as bad as they've played in a long time. And they're losing spectacularly. Out in California. Now, the Mets have not played them yet. Mets have to put the final nail in the coffin, the stake in the heart of this vampire, this monster. They kind of put a nail last year in their heart. One of the first nails in the coffin last year when they beat them in Atlanta when Lindor hit the home run in the ninth inning. But the Braves broadcasters, they are the worst homers in Major League Baseball. They are the worst, and they've been bad for almost 40 years. So now they're sort of having their comeuppance, and now things are not looking so hot for some of their pitchers. But we'll get into that. This is an awful announcing. Braves analyst calls for ABS at the umpire's brutal strike call. Quote, "We know the ABS is probably on the way. We hate to have it, but we need it when things like that are happening." Now, I would mention, the Braves, and the article says the Braves are in desperate straits. And so are the broadcasters. They're not used to this. The Braves had a miserable offseason. They did not re-sign Max Fried. Max Fried is probably going to win the Cy Young Award in the American League. He's pitched that great for the Yankees. That was a disaster that they let happen. And they've not run their ball club great over the last year or so. The Mets beat them in that doubleheader. They just do a lot of strange things, the Braves. They're not very professional, specifically when it comes to the Mets. They always schedule these night games on getaway day all the time during the middle of the week when the Mets have to go and be in New York the next day or somewhere else, on the road. But the Braves announcers and the Braves, I'll say this again. But anyway, desperate times call for desperate measures, which is why Atlanta Braves announcers are calling for drastic umpire changes. This is all hypocrisy. The Braves dropped their 7th straight games Sunday afternoon as a loss to the San Francisco Giants sent them 14 games back at the first place New York Mets and 10 games on the 500 for the first time since 2017. And home plate umpire Jansen Visconti did little to help dig the Braves out of their hole. Now, if you are a National League fan, for 30 years, the Braves have been getting every weird call at the plate you can imagine. How many calls did Greg Maddux get on the edges that were not strikes? How many calls did Tom Glavine get that wasn't a strike? How many times over a 10 to 15 year period with them specifically did they get calls? And if we had the ABS back then, they wouldn't have been nearly successful. That's the hypocrisy. Let me get into this. Trailing by 1 run with 1 out and 1 out in the ninth inning, Braves outfielder Alex Verdugo took a 2-strike slider that was off the plate. Visconti, however, either saw it differently or didn't see it at all and opted to call it strike 3. Okay, how many times did the Mets and so many National League teams take called dirt strikes when the Braves were on the mound? Many, many times, thousands of times. Quote, "Oh no!" Braves play-by-play voice Brandon Gowden said immediately, No, of all the places to miss that call." The unjustified untimely strike call by Visconti convinced Braves analyst C.J. Nitkowski to wave the white flag and say it's time to welcome the automated ball strike challenge system. Now, again, we had this in the 90s. The Braves wouldn't have won as many games as they did on the backs of these weird pitches that the Braves were throwing and getting called third strikes and strikes in general. Never at any point, quote, never at any point when the baseball comes out of his hand is it in the strike zone. Nikowski said, well, that sounds familiar. That looks familiar. That's terrible. I mean, that's not even close. And again, we know that ABS is probably on the way. We hate to have it, but we need it when things like that happen. We kind of needed it in the 90s. The disgust by Gary Nikowski was justified. It was a brutal strike call at the worst time of the game. Bad umpiring is not the reason the Braves are 10 games under 500 or 14 games behind America's team at this point in the season. But it hasn't helped. With there always being such emphasis on speeding up the game, the thought of giving managers more challenges seems like an obverse action. But with strike calls like this one from Visconti, it's hard to argue against ABS. And of course, last week, Commissioner Rob Manfred said the league will propose to add the ABS challenging system for next season. But, you know, like I said, the hypocrisy from the Braves broadcast is unbelievable. For 35 years, folks, if you're a baseball fan, you've had to deal with bad calls by umpires in favor of the fucking Braves. Excuse my language. And now these brain-dead broadcasters down there in Atlanta think that they're all outraged. Give me a break. Give me a break, folks. Give me an absolute break. The outrage. This is outrageous. You've been living off of this for 30 years. These strike calls. And I could never understand, folks. I remember Greg Maddux when he first came up. He was an okay pitcher. Okay? But how he was able to throw pitches like he did, it was unnatural movement in these two seamers. Because nobody, I can never remember a two-seamer like that. It would look like it was going to be off the plate, and at the last minute, it'd go onto the plate. It didn't look like a natural pitch. And there's only been one other pitcher that I can remember that threw a pitch similar to that, but didn't nearly have the success that he had, was the Mets' Rick Reed. You sort of called the poor man's Greg Maddux. You know, so I never understood why Greg Maddux had that kind of success when he was an average pitcher up until the early 90s, and then was throwing this pitch that had unnatural movement. I mean, the two-seamer makes that move, but it's not like it starts at the... I mean, that pitch against a left-handed batter would look like it was going to hit his hip, and then all of a sudden, in the last 3 or 4 or 5 feet, it would make that turn. It never seemed natural to me. I don't think it was natural. And then Tom Glavine would do some similar things, and then when he got to the Mets, he couldn't pitch anymore. I was like, what's up with that? It took them 2 years to figure out what the hell was wrong with him. Very strange stuff. And that's why I have very little respect for the club. I have very little respect for the franchise. I have zero respect for Chipper Jones. He go F himself with his kid. I think that's disrespectful. Naming his kid Shay. If he was getting his lunch handed to him, you think he'd be naming his kid Shay? No. No, he wouldn't. So why should we take it as fans? Oh, that's great. Bullshit. If he was getting his ass kicked every time, he wouldn't be calling his name Shay. But his kid's name's Shay. That to me is very disrespectful, in my opinion. Well, thank you for watching this video. Of course, please subscribe to me on Substack. Subscribe to me on YouTube. Follow me on X. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later.